Hey there, welcome to Factually. I'm Adam Conover. Thank you so much for joining me on the show again. You know, Labor Day was just a little while ago, and if you know anything about me, you know that that's an important day to me because I care about the labor movement very deeply. I owe so much of my life and my career to the fact that I'm a member of two strong militant unions. Our strikes in 2023, being a part of those strikes was one of the most important things I've ever done in my life, because it taught me that when average people get together and fight like hell for what we deserve, we can force those in power to give us what we want. Not ask, not vote, not donate or hope. We can force them to make the world better and to do what we demand them to do. That lesson was so important to me because it also showed how the labor movement has transformed America itself over the centuries. The labor movement is what gave us the 8-hour day, overtime pay, workplace protections. The labor movement even made America more fundamentally democratic because when people have a voice in their workplace, they have a voice in the very country itself. And it convinced me that a strong labor movement is essential towards making America a better place going forward. So, I should have been celebrating all of that this Labor Day. But, instead of flipping burgers and honoring the American worker, I spent a lot of it pretty depressed because things are actually looking very bad for the labor movement in America right now. In fact, despite some historic victories over the past couple of years, things are worse than they have ever been in over a century. In February, Trump fired a member of the National Labor Relations Board, leaving it without enough members to perform its duties of protecting workers and validating union elections, which means that workers who want to form new unions are going unprotected. Then in March, he ordered 22 federal agencies to throw away the collective bargaining agreements with their workers and their unions. And as a result, in August, nearly 500,000 federal workers had their right to organize taken away from them. Liz Shuler, the president of the AFL-CIO, called this the single largest attack on the labor movement in our history. And the most disheartening part of it is that this man, this president who did these things to harm working people, was elected largely by the working people that the labor movement seeks to represent, which shows us that something is deeply, deeply wrong with the labor movement, with the American economy, and with our very political culture. There's no other way to put it than that all of this is incredibly depressing. Again, the labor movement is something that's very important to me, that I've spent a lot of my life fighting for, and that I believe is the way forward in America. And we are taking the biggest step backwards for labor rights and for the rights of working people in a century. So what the fuck do we do about it? Well, the truth is that we're not powerless. We have the same power today that workers have throughout history, the same power that built the labor movement itself. And my guest today reminded me of that. Her name is Julie Su, and I'm so thrilled to have her on the show. She is a brilliant organizer, litigator, and advocate. She has spent decades as a champion for workers, and especially immigrant workers. She pioneered new ways of combining worker organizing with litigation and policy reform. In 2001, she won a MacArthur Genius Grant for her efforts on behalf of undocumented Thai garment workers. And from there, she became California's labor commissioner, and then she spent the last couple of years as the acting secretary of labor in the last Biden administration. She is unquestionably one of the most important voices in the labor movement today, and one of the best people equipped to help us understand the challenges that this moment faces. So I cannot be more thrilled to have her on the show. Before we get to that interview, I just want to remind you that if you want to support the show and all the conversations we bring you every single week, head to patreon.com/Adam Conover. $5 a month gets you every episode of the show ad-free. You can also join our awesome online community. We would love to have you. And of course, if you want to come see me do stand-up comedy on the road, wear your union t-shirt or just give me a fucking fist bump for workers' rights, I would love to come see you. I'm doing a brand new hour of stand-up comedy, touring it all over the country. October 5th, I'll be in Los Angeles, California at the Lodge Room, one of my favorite venues in the city. Please come out to this show October 5th in LA. October 17th through 18th, I'll be in Tacoma, Washington. October 24th and 25th, Spokane, Washington. November 5th, Des Moines, Iowa. November 6th, Atlanta, Georgia. November 13th, Philly. November 15th, Brooklyn. I'm doing the Bell House, another one of my favorite places, on November 15th. This is part of New York Comedy Festival. December 4th, I'll be in DC. And December 5th through 6th, I'll be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Please head to adamconover.net for all those tickets and tour dates. And now, please welcome the incredible labor activist, Julie Su. Julie, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Last time I saw you was at a conference in DC we were both at, and you at the time were the acting secretary of labor. You've been out of the government for a little bit now. What is your reaction to what has happened to labor rights in America since? It's been a lot of activity in a very short period of time.
Yeah, it's been a lot of very damaging and devastating activity in the last 8 months. So to kind of put it in context, right? We had a president that came into office promising to put working people first. And in many ways, everything that we did in the administration was a rejection of the idea that in order for the economy to do well, somehow working people have to suffer. This administration, the last 8 months, has not only reversed everything that we stood for, but has waged an all-out war on working people. From their own federal workforce, the things that people have had to endure, the job loss,
hundreds of thousands of people fired.
Oh my gosh. And then the just stripping unions, right? Taking contracts and ripping them up as if that's okay. The shutting down of entire agencies that do important things. And then just the chaos of all that, right? Firing people who keep our drinking water safe and oversee our nuclear arsenal and our national parks, and then realizing, oh, actually we needed them, and then asking them to come back, and then making them leave again. It's just been horrific.
And how fucked up is it that some portion of the country has been cheering for these firings where I'm like, we're cheering for layoffs? We're cheering for people being fired? Like, it's a bigger issue, but we've lost the cognizance that these are like fellow Americans that we're talking about who just like lost work, who many of whom maybe voted for the current president, you know, or donated to the party, or they're part of the communities in which we live. These are people. They're not.
That's right.
The idea that people can be a waste that we need to trim. For that to infect like the government itself and like really the psyche of the entire population of the country.
It's so repulsive, but it's part of the MO for Donald Trump and his administration, which is to collectively vilify some entity. In this case, government bureaucrats. In other cases, it's immigrants, right? Whatever it is, and use that as a way to essentially dehumanize them, do exactly what you said. So you're not thinking about this is a human being who took an oath, is doing a job, in many ways decided to take a job that paid less than another job that they could have had. Yeah. And then many of them spent decades trying to perform a public service. So you're not thinking about that anymore.
I have a member of my extended family, I don't want to say who because of the climate right now, but like I remember she got a government job, right? Inspecting stuff coming across the border. And the whole family was so proud because it was such a great job. And she was serving the country. And it was like, for so many people, government work has been so like, oh, you're something to be proud of.
Absolutely. You're a public servant, right? You are serving. And many of them are veterans who served in our armed forces and then left the armed forces and came to serve in a different capacity. Many of them are people of color. You know, the federal employee jobs really helped create the Black middle class in this country because people could get those jobs when discrimination prevented them from getting other jobs. And so there's so many benefits to it's an example of a job that somebody could actually do and build a life and have a home and retire with dignity on. And this administration at every turn is clearly sending a message that they believe that workers just have it too good, right? Yeah. Workers they're too secure. There's too much time off, too many union protections. And it's despicable because they're doing all these things while somehow touting themselves as being pro-worker.
Yeah. And they're specifically attacking like the very institutional structures that have supported workers for a century since like the New Deal era. And they're doing it in like innovative, creative ways. You know, they're coming up with bureaucratic ways to, you know, stop like the NLRB or the Labor Department from even functioning by just like throwing cannonballs at you. Can you give me an example of that? Because I'm sure you know the details better than I do.
That's exactly why I say it's a war on workers. It's being fought on many fronts. So what they're doing to their own employees is one thing, but it's also then declaring open season on all workers. So your point exactly about the NLRB is right? The NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, is the board that if a worker wants to organize a union and the employer engages in illegal union busting, let's say fires all the union organizers, refuses to engage in good faith, then the workers can go to the NLRB and say, hey, this is illegal. This is unfair. And the NLRB can protect them. It's supposed to protect them. Under this administration, the NLRB has been gutted. The NLRB cannot function. It doesn't have a quorum. And it's basically making the idea of workers being able to organize without interference and without intimidation illusory.
And literally what happens now is, I remember during the last administration, you know, the workers who were trying to organize at Amazon, trying to form unions at Amazon would do something really sneaky and evil. And then the workers would petition the NLRB. The NLRB rules against Amazon. Sometimes rules for them, but often rules against them and says, here's what Amazon has to do. We have to rerun the election. We have to do X, Y, Z. Now, if you apply to the NLRB, they can't even answer, right? Because they're like, oh, we only have 3 out of 5 people at the meeting because the others have been fired and they haven't been appointed and yada, yada, yada. And so we can't even give you an answer.
That's right.
Which is like, it's not even ruling against workers. It's making the very body that could rule in favor of workers it's dynamiting it.
Exactly. And it's basically gutting the NLRA, right? The National Labor Relations Act. Another example is, you know, the vast majority of workers in this country are not unionized. And so when there's a violation of their rights in the workplace, let's say they're not paid what they're supposed to be paid, right? That's called wage theft. It is one of the most costly ways that people lose money in this country, right? It's that what they do
bigger than like many petty crimes like shoplifting.
Exactly.
Stuff, right?
It's bigger, not better, it's worse. It's bigger than the combination of several kinds of property crimes combined. And where those workers go when they've had their wages stolen from them by their employer is to the U.S. Department of Labor, the department I used to run. And they say, I wasn't paid minimum wage, or I wasn't paid overtime. I was forced to work 60-hour week and was only paid for 40 hours. Somebody needs to investigate this and help me get my wages back. That department, my department, has been cut by over 20%, which means that when workers have a complaint, there's no one to respond. And of course, the civil servants inside are doing their level best to try to keep on doing their job. But it was, the battle against wage theft was not a fair fight to begin with. And now it's made even worse. And then you add on top of that, everything that Donald Trump has done to the economy. So now there's, job growth is slowing. So there's fewer opportunities out there. And so it just, prices are rising. So it adds to the insecurity that workers already feel and it makes it harder and harder for them to make sure that their basic rights are actually real.
They're attacking the workers in the federal government, the protections that protect them, the institutions that would protect them, and they're putting so much emphasis on the needs. I mean, look, it's a government run by billionaires, right? Like for billionaires and against working people.
Exactly.
You, in your time in office, were trying to fight on behalf of working people. I know you by reputation because in my work in the labor movement in Hollywood and in LA, people would say, oh, Julie Sue, we love her so much. Oh, she's so great. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And I know that when you became acting secretary, you were never officially confirmed, right? And part of that's because my understanding is you have a little bit of a reputation as a radical on behalf of workers. And so I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about what is your philosophy that you think people in the labor movement respond to, and people in the business community, right? Or maybe the anti-labor people, what do they find threatening about you? What is special about your approach?
Well, I could speculate.
You can boost yourself up a little bit, or you could do it humbly if you want. But no, I just, what is this about for you?
Well, look, so I have been someone who has fought alongside working people basically my entire career. And I did that mostly here in California, where the labor movement is really strong and where labor protections are really vibrant. And I played the role of enforcing labor laws here in California. And when Joe Biden said that he wanted to be the most pro-worker, pro-union president this country had ever seen, I said, sign me up for that. What can I do to help? And I'm really proud that we took an approach that really rejected the decades-long trickle-down economics idea that as long as the rich do well, everyone else is going to do well. And so we enforce labor laws with the ferocity that requires. We made sure that when federal dollars were going out into communities, that they weren't just building things, they were actually helping to build lives, giving people a real opportunity. We believed in collective bargaining and unions. It wasn't just a talking point. We believe that workers should have a real voice in the job and that the ability and the right to organize belongs to them and to them alone. And so I came to the table on a number of high stakes labor negotiations where I and the President Biden, rejected the long standing practice of thinking about unions and labor strife as something to be controlled. Something to be mitigated, right? We should avoid strikes and economic disruption. We saw these negotiations as an opportunity for working people to finally really get their due. And for many workers who were bargaining, they were making up for many years of contracts that did not reflect their true value.
Yeah.
And so I was proud and honored to be able to come to the table and say, we're not here to tell workers that they should stand down. We're here to help them achieve what they actually deserve. And sometimes employers would say, well, we really can't do that wage increase. It's so far above the market wage. And I would say, well, maybe it's time we start questioning why the market wage is so low.
Yeah.
Rather than telling workers that their demands are too high.
That might be the fucking problem. If the market wages, we've seen the line graph over and over again, how low wage growth has been. The market wage is in fact the problem. That's what we're trying to change. Do you have any specific examples from your time that were big successes, you feel?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I think obviously the reason why union organizing has been so impactful and really, there's been so much vibrancy around the labor movement over the last 4 years before President Trump came into office is because of radical union leaders that said, I'm going to organize, workers standing up for themselves and saying enough, right? I refuse to keep on being treated this way. But it also mattered to have a president and administration under Joe Biden that really believed in worker rights. Mm-hmm. And so, it mattered that we had a president who said to those Amazon warehouse workers, the right to organize is yours and yours alone, without intimidation, without coercion. It mattered that we had a president who was going to walk a picket line and did walk a picket line, right? And so I think that those things helped create an environment in which now unions are more popular than any other institution, basically. And so during our time in office, we saw workers from auto workers to airline flight attendants, from hospitality to healthcare, from delivery drivers to dock workers to actors and writers actually say enough is enough and I deserve my fair share. Yeah. And again, it was just a privilege to be a part of those kinds of cases. A specific example I'll give you is on the ports, right? Port longshoremen on both the West and the East Coast had contracts that expired under our time. And on both of them, I got involved in helping to achieve really record wage increases and other kinds of improvements to their contract. Again, all credit goes to them, the parties, the employers who understood that they had to do right this time by their workers, and the union members themselves who were willing to put it all on the line. But it mattered that when the employer said, hey, look, you guys have tools as an administration to stop this strike, I would say, oh, that's not why I'm here. If you think that that's what we're here to do, or they would say, well, back in 1992 when we did this, or this is what the president did. And I said, do you remember who the president was then? And do you know who my boss is? That is not why I'm here. And it made a big difference, and I'm proud of it.
Folks, this episode is brought to you by Alma. Isn't it wild how the things we turn to for comfort often end up making us feel worse? I mean, I've definitely caught myself doom scrolling or getting stuck in endless social media loops that leave me feeling even more disconnected from the world around me. And in a time when we're all stretched so thin between our physical and digital lives, building real, meaningful human connections has never been more important. That's why, if you're seeking some help in dark times, I recommend looking at Alma. They make it easy to connect with an experienced therapist, a real person who can listen, understand, and support you through whatever challenges you're facing. I can tell you firsthand how much finding my therapist who understands me really helped me on my journey of mental health, and you can find your person too. With Alma, you can browse their online directory and filter by what matters most to you. Then you can book free 15-minute consultations with therapists you're interested in. Unlike other online therapy platforms that just match you with whoever's available, Alma lets you choose someone you truly connect with because the right fit makes all the difference. With their help, you can start seeing real improvements in your mental health. Better with people, better with Alma. Visit helloalma.com/factually to get started and schedule a free consultation today. That's helloalma.com/factually. I mean, how do you balance when you're working for a federal administration the desire to be on the side of the workers, which I believe is obviously sincere on your part, and I think often I saw very sincere on President Biden's part, with the desire to avoid disruption of the rest of the country for everybody else, right? The ports was an example of that. I remember, all the headlines about what could happen as a result. There was also the railroad workers strike. Was that before your time?
I was deputy secretary at the time, and I worked with Secretary Marty Walsh.
And I remember, I remember President Biden being criticized in portions of the labor movement for how that was handled. I also remember reading, maybe after it was settled, there was a lot done to make good by those workers. But I looked at that and said, okay, I mean, railroads are an extremely integral piece of infrastructure for the country. And so if you're the president, you're thinking about that. There's disruption to other people. But also if you're on the side of the workers, you're thinking, well, because it's so essential, that's what gives them power, right? Their essential nature. So you can't take that away and say you're too essential to strike. So it is one of those cases in which if you're part of the administration, you have a dual purpose that's pulling on you in both ways.
Yeah.
And so, how do you handle a situation like that? How was that handled?
I think it goes to what we mean by disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, the prevailing norm was that workers going on strike is disruptive. But I think if you genuinely believe, as I do, that worker exploitation is also deeply disruptive, right? Unfair contracts are deeply disruptive. And they're not just disruptive to workers and their families. They're disruptive to the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you have as much inequity as we have, it's not good for the economy either, right? When you have these obscene levels of difference between what CEO makes and frontline workers make, that is disruptive.
I'm snapping. Yes.
So we have to, I think, define disruption and then say, okay, how do we then end that? And some of that is not going to be comfortable for people. And it's definitely not going to be pretty. But it's really, really important. And I also, the wonderful thing about unions and bargaining and the right of workers to do that is that I deeply believe that collective bargaining and union contracts are good for all sides. I really believe that. And so, being on the side of workers is also being on the side of an industry that gets stability, right? A structure that helps to ensure that everybody gets to be valued. Everybody
Yeah.
gets, right, gets a say. And so I think those things really drove me. And it showed, like, at the end of every negotiation, not everyone, most of them, the employers were also like, thank you. This is better for us, and we can now move forward together
Yeah.
with greater security, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, this is I remember trying to make this argument during the writers and actors strike, where we'd say that the reason the success of Hollywood is built on this talent, is built on this being a play. Just speaking for the writers, where did the Hollywood movie came from? It came from generations of writers coming to Hollywood because this was the one place a writer could get paid, right? Literally novelists, great novelists came here, or playwrights, to write movies because, like, okay, well, at least they fucking pay you in Hollywood. I don't get paid in the theater industry in, Chicago or whatever. I can go to Hollywood and get paid. And if that's no longer the case, then you no longer have the movies. And so, it'd be like shaking them by the coattails saying, we're trying to save your business.
Yeah, right. Right.
And the problem is that the logic of business always necessitates, well, they're only looking out for the shareholders. We just have to, like, save them money. And they ignore the fact that they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. Because, like, if the workers don't have any money, who's at a base level, who's going to buy your shit?
Yeah.
Like, if you're not paying them enough to buy things.
100%, right? That's also part of why, we have a affordability crisis. Right?
Yeah.
People are frustrated. They're anxious. This all makes sense because it's hard to afford housing. It's hard to afford transportation. It's hard to afford food. And that is real. But the affordability crisis is, on the one hand, about what things cost, and on the other hand, about what people make, right? About whether you can have enough in your pocket at the end of a workday to afford the basics of life. And it's also about not just the basics, right? I feel like, we for too long have kind of taken this, working people should just be happy with what they have. And why? Like, why should we be telling workers they have to settle? Right? You should be able to afford the basics, and you should be able to know that you can put up your feet at the end of a hard day and feel genuinely secure. Right?
Yeah.
You should be able to have a job where you can actually take time off when you need it, not just when you have a kid, not just when you have a medical emergency, but because you want to. Right? There's things like that I think why working people are frustrated is that on all of those things, people have been falling behind.
Well, and you were one of the people in the administration who was working on those things in a really clear-eyed and, like, strong way. And we have now seen things go the other way. And I have to say that for me, it's caused a little bit of a crisis of maybe not confidence, but of faith, right? Because I had a lot of criticisms of the Biden administration. I still do, especially in terms of just the sheer politics. I think the politics was really horribly mismanaged in countless ways that we don't need to get into. But in terms of, like, economic policy, you guys were doing things that I had advocated for years, and I actually didn't believe anyone would try, or I thought maybe a Bernie would do it, right? But, like, the Biden administration did all this stuff. Lena Khan as the head of the FTC. Who could I pick better, right? Yes. You in there at the Labor Department. I can't think of many other unionists, I would want. I'm not trying to overly compliment you. I'm talking to you, and I can tell that we have the same values and that you have the same analysis that I do. And other departments as well. But, like, on those core economic issues, you guys were actually doing the shit that I was like, this is what we need to do, both to help people and to, like, revitalize, like, left politics in America. So that working people know that they're being fought for on a really basic level. You guys did it. You did it for, as long as you could, 2 to 4 years, depending on how long you were in office. And then we saw Trump come to power running a campaign that appealed more to working class people, despite the fact that he was doing the opposite. If you look at the numbers of who voted for him, and you have the major unions, the largest union in America, stumping for him, despite the fact that he's now demolished, and they're still doing it. He's now demolishing every labor protection, and they're still supporting the guy. So what was the disconnect that you guys were in there actually fighting? Lena's in there trying to break up the monopolies that are making everything more expensive. You guys are in there actually fighting for working people. Jennifer Abruzzo at the NLRB, who also past guest on the show, wonderful person, who was really actually fighting for work, doing the real work. And yet politically, it paid off not at all. In fact, the opposite happened. What do you think happened?
So I would love to hear your answer to that.
We're still trying to figure it out.
That's the answer. We're still trying to figure it out. I guess I want to say two things. One is, I think that is obviously a critically important question. I also think it isn't the only question, meaning that often gets posed as, okay, then was what we did wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the two go together that way. I think it was absolutely right that we say we can build an economy where workers come first, where people in the middle and people at the bottom actually are our focus, and where we measure our success by how well they are doing, where we prioritize unions, where we prioritize good labor standards, where we prioritize a just day's pay for a hard day's work, every worker coming home healthy and safe, expanding things like childcare and healthcare, right? All of those things. And we do as much with our power as we can, right? We can't raise the national minimum wage. The president called for that. Congress didn't do it. We couldn't do it ourselves. But with every lever that we had, we did do it. Mm-hmm. We raised the minimum wage for federal contractors, right? We added overtime for 4 million people. And this administration has gutted both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important for us not to assume that because of the outcome of the election, that somehow that was wrong, right? Those things worked. And if I have any analysis of what went wrong, I think that we didn't do enough of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think we didn't do them fast enough. And there's all kinds of like structural and other issues that I think need to be addressed if we're serious about fighting for working people, that this moment really provides even greater urgency for. But I think, we can't equate whether those policies were right with the outcomes of elections. But the second point,
I agree with you that we have to stand by the policies. What did we then miss?
I mean, I think we were trying to reverse decades of decline, right? We talked about the anxiety that working people face. And when people are anxious, it was hard to do everything. It was impossible to do everything we wanted to do in the 4 years that we had. But we also inherited an economy on the brink of disaster, a raging pandemic. And our recovery was faster than anybody anticipated and more robust than anywhere in the world. Now,
by the numbers, unfortunately, not in public sentiment. Right?
That's right. And so that's why I say we had more work to do, right? And I think there were a lot of things that we still needed to do. And sort of the difficulty of this moment for me is not just how terrible this administration is in destroying everything that this country stands for, but also in just feeling like with more time, we would have really been able to build on the foundation that we laid in at the beginning of the administration.
I could see that. I mean, give you or Lena another 4 years, and you could have put those changes in, made them more deeply rooted, made more people feel them. Unfortunately, we're on a 4-year election cycle. Well, fortunately and unfortunately, but in this case, they weren't able to happen quickly enough. How much of the problem was not promoting them is the wrong word, or trumpeting them or whatever, but like making the political face of the election and the party about that? I think about just to talk. I thought a lot about my last conversation with former Chairwoman Khan, and she was in there fighting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when Biden was running for election, and then when Kamala took over, they ran away from what she was doing. And part of that was because the Democratic Party was full of people who were like, no, we want to keep merging, right? The Wall Street class in the Democratic Party wanted her out. And there was like a big debate, right, in the party of like, should she be reappointed or not, when like she was doing the work that, had she had more time, had it been trumpeted more, etc. She was doing the work on the affordability crisis. That was what people actually cared about.
Yes.
So is there a problem in the politics of the Democratic Party right now?
And so much of that work was actually wildly popular.
Yeah.
Right? It was people don't want to pay more for things than they have to. They don't want to be stuck in contracts that they shouldn't be stuck in. People want to make decent wages. They want to be able to hold a good job. I think all of those things that we did were actually, they were popular. But at the same time, again, trying to be self-critical about it, I think that reversing the decades of just people feeling like they've been falling behind required more than we were able to do in the time that we had. And some of it is also, I got to look in the eyes of people that we were actually fighting for. I got to crisscross the country, meeting with workers who were in a program, learning a skill that was going to result in a good job right there in their community. Someone who's had to leave their family in the years prior because there wasn't a job there and now they got to come home. Or someone who wasn't sure that their pension was going to be there for them when they retired, right? Guy who was 65-year-old carpenter who said to me, I didn't think that I was going to retire or I would have to choose to let somebody else take care of me. And that was not going to happen. And what you guys did made the pension that I was counting on actually there, right? That is something that we did. And I carry those stories with me because they're reminders that real people are touched by what we do and then by what we don't do. But some of those things, we were hoping to expand the number of manufacturing jobs far beyond the 700,000 or so that we did, that did get created under our watch. But you got to build factories that have been, that haven't existed in order to open them, right? And you got to reverse the relentless offshoring through policies that take a little bit more time. And so I don't say that to try to excuse any of it. I also think that we should have been bigger and we should have been bolder. My message to my team the whole time that I was in office was, what are we doing to unleash our full power, the full power of the Department of Labor for the good of working people?
Mm-hmm.
That's a different question than what are we doing to, bring cases that like count up the number of inspections that we've done, right? That's a different question than, are we bringing cases that we're sure we can win? I think you got to bring cases that you're not sure you can win, because that's how you're really fighting for people who've been left out, right? Who really need your protections. And I just think that there was more that we could have done, needed to do, and would have done with the time.
When I was a kid, I used to love reading the labels on food packaging, finding all kinds of weird, unpronounceable words, searching for unexpected ingredients like some kind of freaky preservative scavenger hunt. But, as an adult, I hate to do this, and I shouldn't feel like my food is trying to trick me into eating mystery substances. And this is exactly why I love Hungry Root. Think of Hungry Root as your personal grocery shopper and nutritionist rolled into one. They do the heavy lifting, like grocery shopping and meal planning, while recommending healthy, delicious groceries and meals that actually match your tastes, dietary needs, and health goals. Hungry Root holds all its food to high standards, screening out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup, artificial sweeteners, and preservatives. They source only high-quality meats and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, offer organic produce and non-GMO options, and carry trusted healthy brands like Oatly, Vital Farms, Ithaca Hummus, Harmless Harvest, and many more. Whether you're gluten-free, dairy-free, high-protein, focused on gut health, or anything else, Hungry Root has meals for you. Just take a quick quiz, and their smart cart technology recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements tailored to your tastes and needs. It's like having a personal shopper and chef all in one, so you can spend less time planning and more time doing what you love. Hungry Root has completely transformed how I eat, and you are going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. So take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, you can get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/factually and use code factually. That's hungryroot.com/factually, code factually to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/factually, promo code factually. I mean, do you think that there is a tension in the Democratic Party, or did you feel a tension in the administration between, like the left or the labor side, right? Folks who are like really working for working people, and then there's the consultant class or the the Wall Street side or et cetera. Like, because sometimes it feels like not everybody's pulling in the same direction, right? And when you say like we should have done more, I'm like, okay, great. You were doing great work. Others who you're simpatico with were doing great work. But was the public not feeling it because that's literally not the direction that everybody was pulling in,
Right. So here's what I would say. I mean, you've already mentioned a couple of them. Lena Khan, Jenna Bruzzo.
Yeah.
We had a U.S. trade representative in Catherine Tai who used the words worker-centered trade policy, right? Understood that we could show up in the world in a way that measured our success by whether working people here and abroad were actually doing well. Rohit Chopra, right, at the Consumer Protection, CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right, who was in there every day, willing to unleash the full power of his bureau to fight for working people. We had people inside the White House, Heather Boucher, right, who helped to run the President's Investing in America investments. These are all people who I think understood our assignment. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I will say is that what helped me a lot in my job is anytime I heard, well, that's not my job because labor is your job, I could say, oh, do we remember who we work for? Mm-hmm. Because this president has promised that this administration, his whole administration, is going to be on the side of working people. So it's everyone's job to make sure that working people do well. And I just think that we have not seen that before, ever, I think, in any administration. And I feel like the story of the true impact of that has also not yet been fully told.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of this impact of your work, unfortunately, is going to be credited to the wrong president because there's a lagging effect. It takes some of those factories that you were talking about are going online in the next couple of years, and guess who's going to be taking credit for them? If we can zoom out and talk about the labor movement more broadly, because you said, as part of the labor movement, and sometimes I'm like, who are we talking about when we say that, right? Because are we talking about those of us who are in union leadership or really going to the conferences or whatnot? Are we talking about people who are currently in unions? Are we talking about the entire working class of America? Sometimes we mean one or the other of those by that word. Right. But I wonder if part of the problem is that just the complete disarray the labor movement is in more broadly in America right now, especially in terms of messaging. Like the fact that you and others like you were fighting so hard on behalf of working people, and the working people of America did not know it. And in fact, so many of them, perhaps most, I don't have the figures in front of me, but it seems like most of them voted for a guy who actually hates them and is trying to hurt them, right? And is able to claim that he's helping them. And they agree to the extent that, again, some of the largest unions in America have pro-Trump memberships, even if their leaders are, know which way is up, they're having trouble communicating it. It seems like the collective sort of working class consciousness, the class consciousness or whatever of the working class in America took decades and decades to build, starting in the late 19th century. And it just feels like it's poof, it's gone. How do we, people don't even have the language in their heads when you're describing what you're doing to understand how it would help them. We're so far behind. Yeah. So I don't want to be too rosy about this, but I do want to push back on something. Good. Well, you couldn't get darker and more negative than what I just said. Those are my darker thoughts. So anything you can say would be rosy. Right. So a couple things on the election, just on that one point. I think that we tend to focus on a couple of loud voices
in the labor movement. But if you look at who voted for Kamala Harris in 2024, the one segment of the population that actually voted more in favor of Kamala Harris than for Joe Biden in 2020, it was union members. So among the many other benefits of being in a union, right, political consciousness is still one of them.
So the number of people, more people voted for Kamala than Biden. The number went up in
the percentage
membership.
Of union members.
Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. And that's sort of consistent with, if states that have more unions have better paid leave laws and higher minimum wages, right? It's like people understand because unions do political education and have an effect on politics. But I'm saying I don't want to be too rosy because I think it's important to acknowledge what some of the challenges are. Now, I do think that part of that is the idea that working people have felt abandoned by both parties, right? By politics in general. That's not an original thought. I do think it's very, very, very true. But leadership matters. So watching, for example, my friend President Sean Fain really, first of all, organize, right, and bargain with the passion and unwillingness to bend that he knew his members deserved was incredible. And then to translate that into, I'm gonna be clear about who stands for us, right? Who's really gonna fight for us, and that mattered in his union. It mattered in terms of of whether people voted, first of all, because again, right, if we really are going to be honest about the election, the people who stayed home are as responsible for the mess we are in as the people who actually voted for the union buster in chief. But I think getting people out there and getting people to understand what was really at stake, it mattered. Leadership mattered. And I think that's a glimmer of hope for us, right? Which is that people, union leaders in particular, we're coming off of Labor Day, right? I was glad to be home and marching alongside the AFL-CIO president, Liz Schuler, right? Our local leaders here, Yvonne Wheeler, Lorena Gonzalez-Fletcher, like people who have been deep in fighting for the labor movement and making sure that workers understand not just why a union's good for them, but also what their power is outside of the workplace. That movement is there, and we need to keep on building it.
I am all about that, and that's part of the movement that I am trying to further myself. I try to do it in my work here, and yet I have to admit that, like, on a national level, right, workers in general, that's the people who are currently organized, smallest share it's ever been of the national workforce, right? We're at our lowest union density, and
yeah,
I was knocking doors in working class neighborhoods in Arizona, right, for Kamala, because that was my little bit of donating my time to try to avert something bad from happening. And I've actually since talked about how I'm not sure that that's the best tactic. I'm like reconsidering like having somebody fly in from out of state to knock doors. A lot of people were doing that. Yeah. Organizing in communities might be more important. But, working class people would open the door and they wouldn't be like, yeah, the political system is helping me, or I'd be there. Yeah. I was there working with the union, right? I was wearing their gear, and they weren't like, wow, the union's here to help me. Yeah. They were like, one guy was like, hey man, I'm trying to watch a fucking football game. Yeah. It's my one day off. This guy yelled at me and I felt so bad. He's like, this is my one day off. I'm watching a football game. Get the fuck off my porch, right? And like, this guy had a hard fucking life, and the consciousness of that there is a movement and a way of thinking about labor and a form of democratic power that he could have is so far from his experience that, like, it would have taken me 3 hours on that porch, right? To like read him all the way in, and so that's the hole that we're in. And because of, 40, 50 years of corporations lying to people, busting the unions, successfully. And we have lost a titanic war over the last half century. And that's what we're amid the wreckage.
Yeah.
So,
right. And, Donald Trump is decimating both unions and government, right? So I have a similar story from the government side where I was knocking on doors in Michigan and somebody also opened the door and was visibly agitated, like also like, you're wasting my time, but said, look, I'm going to vote for her. Obviously, I'm going to vote for her. I'm not an idiot, but you people in government, people like government in general, never comes to me until you need something like my vote. And when I need you, where are you? And so that's another, right? Like it's sort of like institutions not delivering for people is something that I think we need to overcome, which goes to your earlier question about who are we talking about here?
Yeah.
Because we are talking about the labor movement. We're talking about workers who have get put on the line, have a voice on the job, have shown what it means to organize. But we're also talking about the vast majority of America's workers who are not in unions. Some 60 million of whom who say they want to be in a union, but can't do it. It's too hard to join a union still in this country. That's something that needs to be fixed,
because they would have to form one from scratch. Yeah.
That's hard. But we also have, this is why in this moment, Donald Trump's singular ability to divide and conquer is something that he is like deployed, right, as one of his most powerful weapons in his war on workers. So saying that, Donald Trump is the one who's slashing federal funds for infrastructure projects, right? He's the one that is cutting wages. He's the one under his administration. He's the one saying, again, workers have too many holidays. Workers are paid too much. We don't need antitrust enforcement. But he's also saying that the reason why you're not doing well is because of that immigrant who lives in that next community, right? And so it's because somebody who didn't deserve it, who, looks more like me than you, right? Who's the is the person who took your job. He's saying that, and because of the anxiety that people have felt for a long time, there's an appeal to it. And so when we talk about who do we mean, we have to mean all of us, right? We have to mean not just those who are already in unions, but the neighbor, right? The worker who is working the night shift at the, right? Like at the, whatever, the stocking shelves, right? At the grocery store, who's not at a unionized grocery store. And we have to realize, how to make our case that we're all in this together. And part of the problem that you're pointing out of some folks in positions of power saying, hey, we're going to let Trump do what he's doing, is that he's able to say, well, yeah, I'll sprinkle a little bit of crumbs for this little group of people so that they'll speak out for me while, right, like, eliminating anything good for everybody else. And unless we're able to stand all together, that's how he wins.
Yeah. And he's been doing it to the labor movement. I mean, we do have, I went on Sean O'Brien's podcast and talked to him about this stuff, about this was early on in the Trump administration. And, they had just advanced the new labor secretary, and he had the complaints about, well, the Democrats with NAFTA, let me tell you what they did and all of that. And, they took away our jobs. And so why should we trust them? And I'll work with anybody who wants to fight for workers. I haven't spoken with him since, Trump canceled collective bargaining rights for about 1 million workers, or, made it impossible to work at the NLRB. I believe, like, talking to Sean, I'm like, there's a real unionist in there, but, he fights for a lot of stuff that I think is really important, especially here in Hollywood. He's really been very key and critical. But it looks like he's falling for this sort of divide and conquer strategy where it's like, well, I got a lot of members who like Trump, and maybe he'll give me some goodies if I bow and scrape and work together with him. And that's the largest union in America. And one of the most historically radical and militant unions, one of the most important unions in American labor history.
Well, and if you look at what Donald Trump is all about, right? At his inauguration, Jeff Bezos was yucking it up with him.
Right.
And Jeff Bezos, the, fourth richest man in the world, whose company is a behemoth, has grown so much and has now created a situation where people expect, right, same day, next day delivery. And so he has a whole, workforce of delivery drivers who are not his employees by design, right? Who are not paid well, who are not in secure jobs, who don't get any benefits, who are punished if they ever try to unionize, right? Some of those drivers that the driving companies that he has helped to form and then uses, he cuts off the minute they try to unionize, is also affecting not just Amazon drivers, but organized, unionized Teamsters, UPS drivers who are losing their market share to this behemoth that is revolutionizing the way package delivery is done.
Yeah.
Right? So that's also why it's got to be about every worker, right? It can't be about give me some crumbs for this one thing, or even worse, right? Like let me come to, show up in a photo op, and not about actually delivering for. That was not a pun that I intended to use. Not actually, right? Standing on the side of those workers. And the more you allow the non-unionized, exploited, low wage, like if you're not an employee, you are not entitled to a century's worth of labor law protections in this country, like minimum wage, like overtime, and like the right to organize. Amazon is perfecting the art of calling people not employees, right? And those practices are deeply, deeply devastating. Trump's Department of Labor is now making it easier to call people independent contractors and not employees. So all of this is connected, and all of this is hurting also those union members, right? Who are being told it's the immigrant down the street.
Yeah.
Who's your problem?
Well, this is, this strikes at a number of like perennial problems in the labor movement. One of them is, I would have to assume, if you just look at, say, the Teamsters membership and why or union membership overall, why do so many union members like Trump? A lot of it's because they're exploiting cultural issues. And what do we say what do we mean when we say cultural issues? We're talking about racism. We're talking about like exploiting racism, which is one of the things that hobbled the labor movement from the beginning. Was like one of the great sins of the labor movement was not allowing, white unions not allowing black laborers in because they'll dilute or they'll, to use horrible language. And so that's one. But the second is, to me, it often seems like if the labor movement or the idea of unions has one systemic problem, it's that we create these unions that are looking out for their members, as well they should. The members tell the union what they need. The union fights for the thing. The problem is that creates a structure that is really fighting specifically for those members. And so then you end up with a structure where, for instance, let's not take risks to grow our union, because then we're using the dues of the people who we currently represent to go get new people. Really, we should just be looking after the people we have. Or, hey, let's support, even Sean Fain was a little bit supportive of the tariffs, right? Because, this could benefit my members in this narrow way, even though it might not benefit Americans or working people overall. Maybe Sean O'Brien is making the same calculus. It is a thing that happens sometimes within the movement, where like a union will focus a little bit too much on the narrow needs of its own members for sort of a short-term gain, and not on the needs of all working people. And it's a hard thing to ask of a union leader to say, hey, don't worry about the members who got you elected or who pay your salary. Worry about all working people.
Right. I'm really in agreement with, it's a hard thing to ask. I'm not even sure it's always a fair thing to ask, because why is it all on unions, right? To fix this thing that we are in. The idea that they can and should fight for their members. And that's what I saw again, like in the bargaining context, right? Just seeing that, record wage increases, record benefits, retirement security that most workers don't have. I think that when unions fight for those things, it does have a ripple effect of benefit for other workers, if only because when you raise wages for some workers, you raise them in an industry, you're going to raise them generally. Going back to Sean Fain, right? After his negotiation with the big three, we saw non-union auto companies raise their wages too.
Right.
Now, it's cynical, right? Or, let's talk about the airline industry. I talked about airline flight attendants, right? From the APFA to the AFA, right? Sarah Nelson talks
She's
about
been
this
on the
all
show
the
as well,
time.
yeah.
I love her, and
She's amazing.
the idea is that when you raise those wages for your members, others in that industry, other airlines are going to increase their wages too. Now, they do it for a horrible, cynical reason, which is if I can keep it just high enough that my flight attendants don't want to organize, right? It's
like with Delta is
exactly.
It works that way. They've been trying to unionize Delta for flight attendants for years, but Delta's wages are like, they're not so bad, but the reason they're not so bad, like they should be better, but it's because they're competing with the other unionized airlines.
Exactly.
And so it's like the work of all those union flight attendants for the other airlines
that is
benefiting those Delta flight attendants.
That's right. And those wage increases have a benefit, right? Like I work with Julie Hendricks on their negotiation with American Airlines. And the thing that you hear from the company side is, well, if I do this here, I'm going to have to do it for all of my contracts with all of my workers. And my response was, yes. So there is a benefit. There are things that unions do for their members that have much broader effects. I think on the tariff issue, since you raised that, I think it's important also to say, right, this idea that the trade policies of both parties, but of Democrats also, let me just do this critique right now, has helped to accelerate the offshoring of jobs and has created the competition for decent working conditions in this country and elsewhere in ways that are bad for workers in across the globe, is something that I think the Democratic Party definitely has to own as a problem, right? So for either Sean Fain or anybody to say, hey, tariff policies can actually benefit working people and benefit American industry, right? And benefit like iconic American companies. That's not a crazy thought. I've never heard Sean Fain say, oh, and the chaotic, ridiculous, just whoever happens to stroke my ego gets the benefit way of doing it of Donald Trump is the right thing. Never heard him say that.
Fair. You're right. I saw some quote where he said, hey, tariffs aren't always bad in all cases or whatever. But I think that the way the administration is currently waging them is senseless. And it's just an old man who read about tariffs in the 50s and like wants to keep doing it that way and is like manifestly hurting people.
Yeah, it's the one word he seems to have like locked into his brain as related to something policy minded that he could say.
And the Democrats like need to acknowledge, when Bill Clinton did so much to open up trade in these ways that were damaging, it was because he had accepted like the Reagan consensus. Like this was Democrats abandoning their values and abandoning working people and going down the wrong road for decades.
Right.
And that needs to be owned.
Bother to answer the question, is free trade actually free for workers? Right. Yeah. And I think, that is something that we also did look at and try to address in the Biden administration. But the way this administration is doing it is not good for anybody. And that's why, this president's failing on every front. And what keeps me up at night is that by the time people feel it, and they're feeling it in the high prices that remain, right? They're feeling it in the like just the daily sort of assault that this administration is. They're obviously feeling it in immigrant communities that have been just vilified and the really gross ways that militarized power has been used to, in a very racist way, attack those communities. But the way that my fear is that when people really feel everything that's happening, it's going to be the harm is going to be so great that it's going to take us a long time, even longer, to reverse. And it took us, 4 years to reverse the damage done the first time around Trump won. And this time he is much more aggressive and much more unhinged.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to expand our view beyond reversing what Donald Trump did. Absolutely. And as just to keep it to labor, we need to rebuild to what we had in the 40s and 50s, which took close to a century to build. And it was a century of warfare. It was a century of, it started with violence in the streets, you know?
Right. People
And
died.
People died. People were shot by their own government. People were shot by private security, by the Pinkertons and all this. You know, the people who've watched this channel know this. I guess that, you know, one thing that Sean O'Brien and I might agree on is that, you know, the labor movement has spent too long just assuming that the Democratic Party would protect them when the Democratic Party really only had a 50-50, you know, like would do so on Wednesdays and Fridays, but not the rest of the week. Where I think I differ from him is the answer is not to go to the Republicans. The difference is to like go back to building power for workers from the jump. And I wonder how we do that, because it strikes me that when we talk about how Donald Trump has demolished labor rights, he's taken a wrecking ball to them via extra legal means. You know, I just won't appoint anybody to the NLRB and then they can't function. I'll, you know, fire these people illegally or take away their bargaining rights illegally. And I don't know, fuck you, try to stop me.
Right.
Do we in the labor movement need a less legalistic, court approved, play it by the rule books approach? Or do we need to get out there and get in the streets and start fucking shit up and, you know, in extra legal ways?
Yeah. So as someone who has participated in and is a deep believer in, nonviolent civil disobedience, right? I definitely believe that we need to be using every tool in our own arsenal. And we need to be much more open-minded about what those tools actually allow us to do. I think that, and this is not just a party issue, I think this is just a complacency issue in general. I think there's been for a long time this idea that, we're only permitted to do this much, right? We're only permitted to ask for this much. We only deserve this much. There's that complacency, I think, is also sort of come home to roost now, because again, Donald Trump gave voice to the frustration that's ultimately embedded in that. And when I asked my team to unleash their full power, sometimes the response was, no, we're already doing that. This is all the power that we actually have. And when you take a hard look at not new laws you need, not Congress to act, but just things that we were allowed to do, laws that were on the books, penalties that you could slap at lawbreakers, ways that you could actually define the employer as the whole corporation, not just the one work site. Once you did that, you could see that there was more power that we had that had not been utilized for a very long time, powers that had been long dormant. I am a big believer that we need to take the dust off of powers that we have as government, that working people have, that communities have, and say, let's fully unleash them. We're seeing right now just how big the federal government is, even with all the cuts, when you train all of its resources on destruction.
Yeah.
Imagine if we took all of that power and those resources and train them on how do we make life better for working people?
Yeah. Well, my question though is, how do we harness the power of working people themselves to do that? Because yes, we need the government to work on behalf of working people. And we also need the protection of the government for, strikes and things of that nature. But also, my lesson from our strike is that working people have power all by ourselves, right? Yes, we were doing a legally approved strike. You know, we had the LAPD labor detail making sure that, the companies didn't harass us when we were picketing because we were legally allowed to do so. And that's like an important thing to have, right? So it's important to not have the government be against you. It's very, very helpful. Really helps you achieve your goals. But the folks who built the labor movement, they didn't have that. They just did it straight up through their power. And we, forced these companies to agree to things that they said they never would,
That's right.
simply by refusing and staying on the picket line for 5 months. Now thank you. Well, I appreciate that. We had a lot of structural advantages. I'm very lucky to be a member of the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild because we have a lot of structural advantages that a lot of workers don't. We have a 100-year history of our union.
Yeah.
Writers Guild has been militant for that long. So I'm not trying to say that it's easy. It's very, very difficult. But like what it taught me is like the workers themselves are the ones who have the power.
Right.
The problem is how to harness it from this low ebb. My friend, Hamilton Nolan, the wonderful writer, he wrote about and wonderful union leader who helped unionize digital news writers in New York. Wrote about after, when Trump is taking the labor rights away from so many federal workers, he's like, these workers need to rise up. They need to have wildcat strikes. We need to recognize that as a labor movement, this is a do or die moment. Like they need, and I said to him, I think over text or something, I was like, hey man, those federal like government unions, they've been operating with complete federal protection for like 50 or 60 years. They've never organized. They've never had to organize their workers. It's just been, hey, you get to be a part of the union and you get the benefits and you don't ever have to fight for them.
Yeah.
They are starting from a dead stop, so we can urge them all we want, but we got to, in the Writers Guild, our muscle is strong. We always keep it strong. There's a lot of workers out there where the muscle is not strong yet. And so how do we build up?
And you just used the word that I was thinking of, right? It's a muscle.
Yeah.
Right? Exercising power is a muscle, which means both that if you don't use it, it atrophies, but the more you use it, the more you have of it, right? It's not one of those things I've heard a lot of people say to me when I was in my position, well, we have limited capital for X, right? Capital meaning power.
Yeah.
And I would always say, no, the more you use it, the more you build it. It's a muscle. And so I actually, and maybe I'm overly optimistic about some of these things, but I think that tying the threads of the many things that you just said together, I think there's room for optimism because, again, in the 4 years under President Biden, we saw a resurgence of the labor movement, not driven by the most pro-union president, not driven by, just federal investments or a great NLRB, but by workers themselves in places that most people said, oh, they'll never be organized because they're too vulnerable. The jobs are too temporary, whatever that is, right? Whether, from workers building school buses in Fort Valley, Georgia, right? Mostly Black and white workers who came together and got a first contract in under a year. I challenged them to get to a first contract in under a year because we haven't even talked about how delays in getting to first contracts is another way of punishing workers, right? But to Starbucks baristas, right? To graduate student workers, lots of people in workplaces where organizing was thought as a far-fetched, right? A pie in the sky. A few people might dream about it, but it would never happen. And so under President Biden, 400,000 private sector workers joined unions. Now, sure, in a population like the size of the United States, that's still incremental change, but it's positive incremental change.
Yeah.
And then you have, and now here, I'm also not just like throwing away empty praise here, but what you guys did, demonstrating that writers and actors are actually working people too.
Yeah.
And are union members, and being in a union makes a really big difference. I'll also say that writers, because of your creativity, have the best picket signs. Best picket signs. And I'm sorry to all the other, I've been on a lot of, but AI has never been to fat camp. AI has never had childhood trauma. I repeat those a lot. But, those victories really help to inspire other people to test out their muscle as well.
Yeah.
And then I think that the one tiny little bit of glimmer of hope in this administration is that the attacks are so disgusting. They're so racist. They're so anti-union that, the Labor Day actions on the streets are not normal because people haven't felt like they've had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And my old, team, federal employees, are organizing and drawing on courage that they did not think that they would ever have to use. But once you do it, it's hard to tell people not to do it anymore. And I think that is going to be really critical as we continue to fight, but also, to your point, rebuild a world that we deserve, that we really want.
Yeah, I mean, there's this narrative that the government blessing of unions, right? The National Labor Relations Act and all the associated New Deal policies that sort of brought about labor peace. There was warfare, literally people being shot and dying, right? Violent strikes, violent reprisals. And, the point was, part of it, we're going to have peace. We're going to like make this legal. We're going to have a system for adjudicating it, et cetera. And that brought about, the middle class, but it also made the labor movement kind of lazy. There's an argument that folks make that, okay, well, now we can just rely on, the government. Oh, actually just one of the parties. Well, actually just one of the parties on a couple days a week, right? And that's what we've been doing for decades. But now that those things have fallen, I have heard people say, hey, maybe the dynamiting of the NLRB and NLRA is maybe those things were holding us back.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, what we need is to be forced to fight, is to be forced into a corner. Do you agree with that?
No, I mean, I hate that because
it's a positive spin on a negative situation.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I guess it's sort of saying like I think that we should be able to have both, right? I think we should, say that workers should be able to be militant, exercise all their power, have their voices heard, and make demands for what they should have. And I think that every single other lever, but especially government, because government's supposed to exist for the public good and unions provide a public good, should also be on their side. So, of course, I think that exercising the muscle is really good. I hate the circumstances under which it's having to be done right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Well, let's end this on a positive note, or because you were telling us about how once people start fighting, that they remember the fight and they keep doing it. So, for folks who want to start fighting for working people in their own working area, where do they start? What do you suggest folks do?
Well, I just learning from the workers I've been so privileged to advocate with and live my life with. I think you start with talking to somebody else, right? Everybody is an organizer and everybody is a leader. That is the fundamental sort of principle behind organizing and what makes unions strong. And in this moment where our entire democracy is on the line, it is an exercise in democracy. So you talk to someone. The number of workers I met, again, all across the country, who were either fighting for a union or had just gotten their first contract, who said, when I started, I never thought I'd be sitting here with this thing that I have now, right? It all started with them actually talking to someone at work, talking to another worker, realizing that you're not alone. And sometimes it's about being the one who says, don't you think we deserve better? And that is a spark that fuels, an organizing drive. And not everyone's going to get on board at the beginning, right? Not everyone is going to believe in it. Not everyone has the same risk tolerance. And I think being that first spark to say to somebody else, I think we deserve better. I think I think we can do better than this. Is where it begins. And then I think for everybody else who is horrified by what is happening in this moment, I think it is our job to wake up every day and speak up about it, to be honest about it, to make sure that if it's the like people recording what's going on is really important, recognizing whatever privileges we have, each of us, and using them to say that what's happening is absolutely not okay, is I think really important. But the idea that we deserve better and saying that to somebody else so you're not doing it alone is, I think, really important, because that's also about, it's not just that we have to fight back on what's going on now. It gives us a chance to really imagine what we deserve.
That's really beautiful. Is there anything that you feel, I mean, look, I'm a member of union leadership myself. I'm on the board of the Writers Guild West. Is there something that those of us who have the benefit of being in these mature unions should be doing? What is the responsibility of the rest of the movement right now, in your view?
I think it is, gosh, I mean, I feel kind of funny telling other people what they should be doing because I'm constantly struggling with, am I doing enough?
Yes.
But I think recognizing that there are powers that have not been utilized fully is really important for everybody.
Yeah.
And then what does it look like to really utilize them? And we had a whole conversation about this, Adam. But I really feel like recognizing that today the fight, we should be asking who is hurting and what can I do about it, even if it's beyond the usual circles that we've had.
Yes.
I think that this moment calls on us to do that. And then just for union leaders, I think telling the story, because it is true that not enough people, even good, politically conscious, politically active people, don't fully understand what unions do.
Yeah.
Why they're so important. And I think everybody needs to take a hard look at if you're in a good job that has job security, that has benefits, that has paid vacations, right? That has no forced overtime, that none of those things are required by law.
Yeah.
You have those things because you have a union. And just, I do think it's a time to tell those stories.
Yeah. And to return to your earlier point about if someone is suffering, that's to extend our circle to them. That's solidarity, right? Which is that's the most important union word. And we need to extend our circle of solidarity from just those of us who are doing the same job or in the same union or in the same part of the movement to like all working people and like, grow the movement and support all of them. I have solidarity with pretty much everybody except for Donald Trump and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. You know what I mean? 99.9% of people in this country are working people.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to throw in everyone who's enabling and excusing and lying for them also.
Yes.
On the,
yes.
Yeah.
We could make our not solidarity list because it's a lot shorter than the solidarity
100%
list. Right.
That is right.
And if we remember that we're all in it together, I think we'll fight for each other.
Yeah,
We'll hopefully get out of this maybe.
Yes.
Where can people follow your work or learn more about what you do?
So I have a Substack.
You do?
I have a Substack.
Okay.
And I'm
everyone's an influencer now.
I'm excited though because so many of what we talked about are things that I've been thinking about and writing about. So that also really warms my heart. But Julie Sue Labor is where I am on all kinds of platforms.
Amazing. Julie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. This conversation is something that will keep me going for a while.
That's a very nice thing to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, my God, thank you once again to Julie for that incredibly inspiring conversation. If you'd like to support all the conversations we bring you every single week, head to patreon.com/Adam Conover. We would love to have your support. For $5 a month, you get every episode of the show ad-free. For $15 a month, I will read your fucking name at the end of the show. Can you believe that your name or ass username? It's not ass username. It's very clever and funny. Tony, bleep when I said ass, please. I want to be complimentary towards the nice people and their nice usernames. This week, I want to thank, let me pull up the names. I want to thank Jake, Callan, Hey Look a Distraction, Uber Elder, Avaro Eggburger, and Tracy. Let's pull a couple more from the middle of the list. I also want to thank Spencer Campbell, Antonio LB, Margie, Lacey Tiganoff, Samantha Schultz, and Kelly Lucas. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Head to patreon.com/Adam Conover. If you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you. Of course, if you want to come see me on the road in Los Angeles on October 5th, New York City, November 15th, Philadelphia, DC, Pittsburgh, Spokane, Washington, Tacoma, Washington, Atlanta, Georgia, bunch of other great cities as well. Head to adamconover.net. I'd love to see you out there. Of course, I want to thank my producers, Tony Wilson and Sam Roudman, everybody here at HeadGum for making the show possible. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Factually.
That was a HeadGum podcast.